I'm working on putting together the image for my next piece. And this is pretty big, so what I'm doing is I've printed out the pieces and parts of her face and cut them out. And I'm going to create one big decal to apply to the wood square that I'm going to paint this on. And that way I have a nice white background to start with, even though I'm going to gesso over this. Because the wood is so dark, I decided that it would be better to do this as a decal than it would as a sketch right onto the wood. So, and I'm tearing the places where the paper is going to overlap so that I don't end up with a hard line anywhere. So this looks good. And then I have a separate piece that's her crown, and I'm probably going to leave this off until the rest of the piece is painted. So now the trick is to get this all together and get it flat, which is always sort of fun. So I'm applying glue to the places where the pieces overlap. I'm kind of trying to keep it off the places where it doesn't. Never quite managed to do that, but and that's kind of the reason that I want to keep the glue off the places where it's not overlapping, because I'm getting glue on my brayer. I try to create cut lines in places where it won't hurt the composition too much. So like this piece of hair, it won't really hurt the composition for me to have a cut line right here, which is going to create a hard line on the piece because this is the edge of her hair. And it's going to be a totally different color than what is going on next to it, just her neck and her shirt. On the back side. And this looks like it didn't quite get glued down enough. I'm going to let this sit with a book on top of it so that it dries as flat as possible. So here's my decal. She's pretty flat. She's got a couple of ripples, but that's okay. So I laid down some wax paper. I'm doing this with glue stick. I thought about doing it with matte medium, but I really don't want a coat of matte medium over the top of the wood until the very end when everything is painted and I'm sealing. So I'm going to try this with glue stick and see how it goes. And before I started filming, I did a little register mark at the center bottom of the plywood, and I've also got one at the center bottom of the decal so that I can line them up and get them centered. So, and I just moved the wax paper out so that the portions of it that have glue on it already will not be underneath this top section of the head. Okay. This over and line up my register marks and the decal on the bottom of the page. Oops, just a little ripply right here. I really don't want those ripples on her face. If they're in the hair, that's fine, but not on her face. So I can kind of move them outward a little bit. Okay. I'm going to go around the outside edge and make sure that everything is glued down around the edges. And then I'm going to let this dry flat with another book on top of it so that it has a chance to flatten back out. So here's my nice flat decal applied to this, and I decided that I really do want to put something over the top of it to seal it down better than the glue stick. So I've got some thinned down matte medium, just like I used to prime the wood, and I'm just going to apply a quick coat of that over the top of this, just to make sure that the edges all stay down. I'm using a big bristle brush to apply this. I don't usually use brushes when I apply mediums and sealer coats and such, but for this I think it's a good thing. I'm just making sure that all the edges have been hit. The decal's rippling a little bit, but I'm going to let this dry about halfway, and then lay a piece of wax paper over the top and let it dry overnight, weighted with a book so that these ripples flatten out. So I let this dry overnight, and she came out pretty flat. There's a couple of tiny little wrinkles here and there, but I think the gesso is going to take care of that. So I'm going to gesso this whole thing to provide a nice paintable ground for my acrylics. So this is kind of cheating, painting on wood, but really painting on paper that's been gessoed. But I feel okay about that. So, and I'm using a foam sponge to apply this to just get a nice even coat. And trying to keep my gesso-y fingers off the bare wood, because my goal here is to have beautiful bare wood surrounding my painting. We'll see how that goes. I'm trying to be really careful with the gesso that I drag out to the edge, that I get it all the way to the edge, but I don't get it on the wood. Even though a lot of times when I paint, especially hair, I tend to, I don't know, paint outside the lines a little bit. I tend to not follow exactly what I've sketched. I don't think you can see what I'm doing all the way around here, because this piece is so large. Oh, and one of the things I wanted to mention is that I've been working flat for most of this, because so much of what I'm doing is runny and drippy and not stuff that I want to do on the easel. But once I get this all gessoed, I'm gonna stand it up and put it on my easel and paint on the easel. And that just generally makes things easier to reach. One of the reasons I bought my easel was that I was starting to work bigger and bigger, and I really couldn't reach what I was working on anymore. So I'm having to like really stretch to get the gesso on the top of her head. So once this is dry, I can move on to applying paint. So here's the piece on the easel, and I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try and do it at a couple of different angles, but there are a couple of like long, there's one right here, long ripples that I'm hoping are going to flatten out as I let it sit. I did a little scoring up here along her face where it was rippling, and then gessoed over it, and it's a little flatter, but I'm waiting for this one to heal, and you can see where I nicked the paper and had to pull it away, so there's bare wood right here that I'm having to gesso over, and that happened in a couple of places down here too. So even the best laid plans don't always go according to plan, I guess. I'll just keep going and see what happens.